Right, welcome to the Game Breakers podcast, where we look to bring you tips, insights and experience from the world of sport. My name is Rob Nicolay and I'm joined as always by my co-host Danny Wilson. But today our guest is none other than former Bradford Bulls, Hull KR, Sheffield Eagles player and now London Broncos assistant coach, Jamie Langley. Thanks for joining us, Jamie.
Thanks for having me, lads. I really appreciate it.
Want to jump in, Danny?
Yeah. Again, welcome everybody, and thanks, Jamie, for taking the time out of the whiskey cabinet behind you to be with us. We'll let you go as soon as we can, so you can finish hammering that, mate.
Yeah, thanks. Like I say, I'm going to get the backdrop in order. It is quite an impressive sight, I must admit, but it's taken a lot of time up, to be honest, in this last 7 weeks. I think all I've probably done is drink coffee and whiskey and train. But it's going to have to break that habit when we get back into work. But it's certainly gave me some enjoyment over this period of time.
Fantastic. I'll kick off. Just like I say, normally we start the section off with getting to know you as a person. So for us, just describe to us, as you as a man, a son, and a partner. How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, it's a good question. Is that, Rob? I think a lot of it comes down to how you define yourself, really, and what you identify with. I suppose. I think there's probably two ways of looking at it. I think you either define yourself by what you do or who you are, essentially. And I think when you ask people that question, one of the first things they allude to is they'll probably define themselves by what they do. So they'll say, well, I'm Jamie Langley, I'm coach of London Broncos, or I'm ex-rugby league player, or whatever it may be. And I think that's how a lot of people identify. They identify with what they do. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think especially in careers that are finite, like sports, for example, where there's a shelf life on it, and I think if that is who you identify as, so if it was Jamie Langley, the rugby league player or rugby coach, whatever it may be, and then that can be suddenly taken away from you, which it can be, as in sport. There is a shelf life on it. I think that's where people do sometimes come unstuck, or they find it difficult to then what is their identity after that's taken away, essentially. When your career ends and you see a lot of people and players going through those trials and tribulations, and what do I do next when it is taken away? So I just think it's really important, and it's a point that I try and make as not defining myself as what I do, but more so who I am as a person, and probably let the values that I try and live by every single day guide my decision-making process and things like that. So I probably don't define myself as a coach or a son or things like that. It's just try and live by certain values every day and let that guide me, if that makes sense, without trying to go too deep on it.
I think you put that very clearly. Let's unpick them values, or one key value that you hold close.
Yeah. So, and again, it's something that you probably reflect on a daily basis, really. But I just think, and nobody's perfect. I suppose it's more that who you aspire to be every single day, or try and aspire to be as a person, as opposed to who I am. So whether that be certain values that you feel are important to try and live your life by. So if that's humility, honesty, hard working, being healthy, and ultimately trying to be happy as well. And then you sort of break that down into those different categories. Well, what does humility look like to you? What does being honest look like to you? What does a hard working person look like? And then try and let that guide your decision making process, essentially. So when you are faced with a certain situation on a daily basis, whether that's at work, me as a coach, or as a partner, or as a son, and you're trying to live up to those values as the best as I possibly can. And again, you don't always get it right, but that's where you can reflect on that and decide, well, did I face that situation correctly? Could I have done that any better? And I suppose that's how you can learn to grow and become better as a person. And that's what I try and aspire to do every single day. Just ultimately try and be the best version of myself that I can be, and let those values guide that process.
Fantastic. Like I say, from that point of view, and obviously we've met a number of times, and I think you can see that with you recently. I remember being in and around the England setup, which you had with Australia, and just how much time you had to explain what you was doing. why he was doing things. And I think like that sort of, like say, that humility, and spending time with people and stuff. I think you reflect that, in everything that you do, or from my dealings with yourself anyway. So I think that's fantastic.
No, I appreciate that, Rob. Thanks. And again, I think it helps to simplify your life a little bit as well. When you're faced with decisions and things like that, if you can relate that back to your values and let that guide your decision-making process. So I'll just give you an example. If one of my values is to try and be hungry, to always learn and to grow as a person, then, you're faced with a decision on a morning, for example. My morning routine, it includes a 30-minute drive into work. So does that 30-minute drive include 30 minutes kind of listening to the radio, switching off, or does it include 30 minutes of podcasting? Or probably going through the intentions for the day, what I want to achieve that day as a coach. So if that falls in line with my value as being hungry and growing and always getting better, then I'm going to choose to probably do the podcasting or to probably go over my intentions for whatever the intentions for that day are as a coach. Or when you're faced with a certain situation, what might require humility. So you might, whatever it might be, you might sort of sit back and think, well, is this me, my ego trying to make this decision, or do I want to look at this from more of a modest, humble perspective? And again, you let that then decide your decision-making process. And I just think it simplifies your life a little bit as well, in my opinion. So it's not for everyone, and there's many roads lead to Rome, obviously, but I certainly feel like it works for me, and it just helps me stay very present and enables me to, again, do my job to the best of my ability, be the best son I can be on a daily basis, be the best partner I can be the best friend I can be, whatever.
That's obviously been a long time in maturation. You're looking at where you live now. You said you're working in London, living around the capital city, very elegant, very nice cabinet behind yourself. How does that differ from growing up in Normanton in a rugby league town, rugby league kind of family? Were there any signs and values there? What was it like? How have you been brought up to where you are now?
Yeah, it's certainly a little bit different, Danny. I can't deny that. I was very fortunate, I think, to have grown up where I did in Normanton. As you said, it's a strong rugby league town. It's a mining town, so a lot of the people there from working class backgrounds, and I was very fortunate to probably grow up in that environment at a young age, especially through my formative years. As a young kid growing up in that environment, I grew up probably, I'm a 90s kid, but, I was born in 83, so I grew up in the 80s as well. And a lot of the mines and the pits were open at that time. We did on the steam trains, actually coal trains. He shoveled coal on steam trains, a really tough job, alongside playing rugby league for Leeds as well, played in a very successful Leeds team. But he also worked down pit for probably 18 years, best part of 18 years. So I grew up with parents. My mum also, she worked 10, 11-hour days in a hairdresser's, and it's not easy. You're on your feet all day, you're working tough jobs. So I was fortunate to grow up with parents who were able to instill those values into me at a very young age. Hard work, the importance of being humble, working hard on a daily basis, being very kind, being respectful, treat people like you'd like to be treated, etc., etc. So and that's the environment that we were in, essentially, in that town, growing up in Normanton. And I think throughout your formative years, you are a product of your environment. I think a lot of those belief systems that we carry through now are formed through those years, and I'm fortunate to grow up around people like that, hardworking people, incredibly humble people, incredibly modest people, and those values certainly rubbed off on me. Now, I think as you become an adult in your adult life and whatever career you decide to pursue, and especially in coaching as well, I think it's important that you're able to put those belief systems to the test a little bit. I watched Scully's and Brazy's interviews, and the questions you asked Danny there about, obviously, you being a proud Yorkshireman, and as am I, and I'm sure Rob is as well, and Scully and Brazy being very proud Lancastrians. And that's, when you talk about the nature and nurture conversation, that's 100% nurture. I think that's instilled into you as a young kid through those formative years, to be proud of where you're from, be proud to be from Normanton, be proud to be from Yorkshire and represent your county. And I think that's one of those belief systems that I'm happy to carry on. I think as you become older, you've got to put belief systems to the test. You've got to question it. Why do I view things this way? Why do I believe certain things, whether it be political views, religious views, whatever it might be? I think you've got to put those to the test. But being a proud Yorkshireman and being proud to be from Normanton is one I'm happy to accept, because I think obviously as humans, you've got an innate need to be a part of something and to be proud of something, and that's certainly something that is a belief system that I'm happy to hold on to. And I'm just fortunate, as I say, throughout those formative years, I were around people who were able to instill those character traits and values that I probably carry so much of them through today at a young age.
Yeah, and just like say, just on the back of that, so obviously being from Normanton, what's it like now living in London? You know, in comparison, and how settled are you down there?
It's very different, mate, and it's not for everybody. It's my sister actually moved down London. There's a 10-year age gap between me and my sister, and she moved down when she was very young, probably at the age of 22. So I used to come down and visit occasionally, and it just blew me away. Really, you know, a young lad, probably not left Yorkshire too much, and to come down here, and it's like a different world, isn't it? When you come down, it's so busy, hustle, bustle. Everybody's in a rush to get everywhere. Nobody says hello when you say hello to them. Nobody talks about the look at your daft, and it's a massive culture shock, mate. You might as well be in a different country, really. So it is very different. But what I will say is, I absolutely love it. I love it down here now. You know, I've grown a lot as a person. I see the world very differently as probably what I did when I was younger, and I can really appreciate living down here now. There's always something going on. It's always vibrant. There's lots of energy. I love coming home. Don't get me wrong. There's no place like home, and my parents still live up north, and I love going up north and seeing all my friends, and I'll always be proud to say that Normanton is my home. But myself and my partner Rosie, we are very settled down here. We enjoy the lifestyle. I hate to say it, it does pain me to say it, but the weather's a little bit better down here as well. It's probably always 2 or 3 degrees warmer, and the sun's always shining in the summer, so it's a big selling point for me trying to get lads down here as well. And what you tend to find is when you do get people down here and they do get ingrained to the culture and the lifestyle, they don't want to leave. They don't want to leave. It's infectious. It really is infectious, and just that energy and that, as I say, that vibe that you get down here, you can't really replicate it. So we are pretty settled, and so I'm fortunate I get to go into a job that I love every day. That makes a difference as well. But yeah, we do love the lifestyle down here. It's great.
I suppose, like being down there as well from rugby league perspective, you're not under the microscope as much. Like obviously, you know, those times at Bradford, you know, very much, you know, in the thick of it there, and he, obviously when he was at Hull KR as well, it is ingrained. You know, it's what everyone's interested in. It's part of the fabric of the area. Whereas when you're in London, you're allowed to get on with your business a little bit more. Yeah,
very much so. Very much so. Again, just from a cultural perspective, it is very different from where I grew up. Obviously, grew up in Normanton. It sits smack bang in the middle of Cass and Wakefield. Obviously, massive rugby league towns. So you either support Cass or you support Wakey. And I played for Wakefield District or Cass Schoolboys. And you just brought me rugby league. And you lads, obviously, growing up in Hull, and I was fortunate to play a year at Hull KR and share the passion that the people in Hull have for rugby league as well. The massive rugby league communities where we come from. So that were a massive shock coming down to London. Obviously, it's vast. London's vast. It's massive. It's a huge city. It covers a vast array of different areas, and not only London, but the south of England as well. So we've probably got 30 community clubs down here that are spread out throughout the whole of the south of England. So when I come down there coaching, you've got Premiership football teams. You've got based in West London where we are. It's a rugby union hotbed as well. So you had Harlequins, you had Wasps at the time, based in Acton. They've now gone to Coventry. You got Saracens just north. You've got all these teams. Ealing, where we're based. You got London Irish, London Welsh, London Scottish. You got Richmond. All these clubs are embedded within that community. And then you've got rugby league as well, obviously, with 30 clubs probably spread across the whole south of England. So when I'm getting lads through in the academy, a lot of these lads, they've not played many games of rugby league. it's a case of when you do your talent ID, it's a case of, well, can this lad, can he kick a ball? Does he show some athletic ability? Yeah, let's get him in, then give him a trial. If he stands out, then they're probably going to get a chance on the scholarship. And then it's about trying to integrate him into the programme, obviously with not much rugby league knowledge. So yeah, that were a massive culture shock for me, mate, I'm not going to lie. And probably a lot of the things that you take for granted when you get lads through probably at scholarship age at 16, just things you take for granted what they'll be doing because they've had it ingrained into them from probably 8-year-old by their community coaches, by the parents who are massive rugby league fans. So they've grown up, all they've wanted to do is play rugby league. We're getting lads through at 16 who've probably played maybe 2 or 3 competitive games of 10 aside, sometimes rugby league, of their lives. And then you're getting them playing against Hull, Wigan, Leeds, against lads who've grown up with it. It's a massive culture shock for them. So you're trying to implement things and fast track them to try and get them through to a level whereby they can compete. So yeah, it's vastly different, mate, but it's also a massive challenge as well. And it's something that I really enjoyed in my first couple of years down in London.
Well, you're not doing too bad because we never have a decent trip down to London with the academy. It's always a tough place to go.
Just while you're on talent ID, Jamie, there is obviously you said not a lot of them have got big rugby league playing lives, if you like, up to that date, but you're still managing to bring some players through. You're still managing to, have good academy teams, like Rob said, and you produce not only for London, but they end up kind of moving up north. For you, when you're looking at players, what is a key ingredient to what makes a good player or a good London player if it isn't just always about the rugby intelligence, if you like?
Yeah, I think there's many facets to that, Danny, as you know, and I think we're quite fortunate that a lot of the lads that do come through into our programme, they've got a lot of transferable skills from other sports. I mean, as you fellas know, you run a very successful talent ID programme at Hull. We get a lot of lads who are from footballing backgrounds, rugby union backgrounds, might be from athletic backgrounds as well. So they've got so many transferable skills. You just got to try and teach them some tech knowledge and instill some ability into them at that age. But we just got to try and create an environment whereby we can try and get the best out of the players, essentially. And it's incredibly difficult to get that balance because we have a lot of lads who are on private school scholarships. So they've got to balance not only private schooling with rugby union, so they might be involved in a Saracens or a Harlequins setup. So we probably only get access to them maybe once, twice a week at scholarship age. That might increase to 2-3 times a week at academy age. But again, we've got to try and fast track them through the best we can. So there's many facets to it, obviously, but I think we are fortunate that A, they have got a lot of transferable skills, a lot of these lads, and B, we've just got to try and create a learning environment whereby we can try and get the best out of them. Now, that's not easy because you try to instill character traits in these players that are probably associated with being a good rugby league player, i.e. being resilient, how do you overcome adversity, being tough, gritty, etc., etc. Now, if they haven't had that instilled into them through competing from a young age, you've got to try and create an environment where that's allowed to flourish. But if you're too hard on these players, then they might just go and do something else because rugby league's probably not at the forefront of where they see their lives in that direction going. So it's just trying to find that balance, really. We're fortunate that we've got a lot of good coaches within our system. Rob Powell does a fantastic job of head of youth, of identifying the players at a young age. We have an origin game, north and south of the river every year, bringing the best talent in from around the south of London to play in that game. We pick up that talent and then they get pushed through into our scholarship. And as I say, we've got some really good coaches working within the community and within our club itself to try and bring those players through as well. But yeah, as you know yourself, it's not easy. You just got to try and think, well, what matters the most and spend the most time on that, essentially, while you've got the lads there.
Outstanding. There's a lot of that stuff in there that we'll probably talk about in your coaching career now, which you're clearly passionate about. Before we go on to that, I just want to kind of just come back a little bit to you as a player. I just want you to just kind of take us through the journey of Jamie Langley, the player, up to, from pretty much signing, maybe when you did it at Bradford Bulls, what that was like in that kind of era, to being well known for having the biggest arms in rugby league. What was that journey like?
Yeah, I'm talking to you talk to some of your mates who've played the game, and it does seem like, for me anyway, it seems like a lifetime ago, really. I think because my career's transitioned into coaching, and that's a massive focus in my life now. Probably don't spend much time reflecting on my playing career as much. So when you get a chance to do it, it is quite interesting, really, when you look back at those times. And I try and do that as well. I try and reflect a little bit to see some of the values that I hold true now. Where did those values come from? And I think a lot of them did come from my early years at Bradford. I think I was fortunate to be involved with a fantastic club that had a fantastic culture at that time. Had a lot of good people involved with it. I mean, it's no secret that Bradford were a very, very successful team, probably late 90s, early thousands, and I was very fortunate to play probably a very small part in that. But yeah, I probably signed at 15, 16 years old. I remember my first game, actually. I think I had an English GCSE at 2:00 in the afternoon. My parents had to rush me to an academy game. We were playing Hull, actually, at the Boulevard, all under 18s, and I had to rush from my GCSE and sit on the bench for my first academy game. And I remember the coach saying, "Don't worry about warm-up, Langers, you'll be all right. You may or may not get on." And that loose forward at the time, Tony Swift, he got an head knock in the first 2 minutes, and I got rushed on to the game. And young 15-year-old kid, and you were up against some good players and in that Hull side. I remember, I think Arnie might have been playing and a few more. They had a very good team. So that was my first experience playing at Bradford. But yeah, I was very fortunate to be involved in the club at that time. They had a great culture, instilled some very good values in you. You wanted for nothing as well. We had good facilities. We had good supplement sponsors. So all the academy players had access to that. They were putting you through educational courses as well that were compulsory at that time. So there were probably an handful of us full-time, almost studying full-time. And you got to work with the first team. You got to work with the academy on the evenings. We had some fantastic coaches as well who were instilling really strong values into you. And as I say, it was a really good environment to be involved with. And then making the transition then probably at 18 to the first team. Again, I was blessed to be around some incredible players. I think you look at that team back then, probably squad numbers 1 to 20 would have all been internationals. Then beyond that, you had lads who were representing England Academy, Great Britain Academy at the time. We had a fantastic playing group, we really did, with some incredible coaches as well. When you talk about leadership and things like that, we had we were very fortunate to have so many great leaders in that team as well, who drove the culture, probably ahead of the time, I'd say as well, doing things, you're talking probably going back 20, 25 years. There were things happening within that environment that I'd put the environment and the culture at Bradford then and that playing group against any team probably now in terms of what were happening behind the scenes and things like that. Things that players now would just take for granted. You use terminology such as prehab and things like that, and your video analysis, sports science, whatever. That wouldn't be unfamiliar to players nowadays. But talking 20, 25 years ago, there were lads at Bradford were doing that off their own backs before that were even a thing. I think that was just a testament, as I say, to the work ethic and the culture that we had there. And I was just really fortunate to be, as a young kid, to be part of that, really. Again, throughout some important formative years, I think that's probably formed some of the characteristics that I hold true today and carry through with me now.
You touch on culture, environment, work ethic a lot in what you're talking about, and it's quite clear that is what you've developed over time and what you're implementing now at London, which we'll probably talk about in a bit more detail soon. But you mentioned in there about them senior players showing leadership qualities. What for you is a reflection of a good leader showing those qualities?
Well, culture, yeah, probably I've used that word a little bit, and it is a bit of a buzzword, culture, I suppose. You get it seen thrown about a lot, don't you? But if I were to sort of flip it back and ask you, what do you think the easiest way to identify, if you can walk into an organisation or a team, what's the easiest way to identify the culture of that organisation, do you think?
you look at the players, at how they are, how they behave. I think culture is used a lot. I think the culture in every environment, regardless if it's positive or negative. But I think it's a word that needs a lot more attention, because that is the key to success. And the fact you've used it so much is probably a testament to why London have achieved so much and why you are as a player. But I think the absolute biggest indicator is the people within it and how they're looking, how they're behaving.
Yeah, 100%, mate. I couldn't agree more. I think the easiest way to identify a culture is not by, it helps having great facilities, but you walk into a facility and, you see a lot of buzzwords on the walls, values, etc. That's not what culture's about. I think the easiest way to identify culture are the actions and the behaviours of the people within that organisation. So I think in order to instill a good culture, and again, don't get me wrong, there's many ways to skin a cat. So there's probably what's a good culture within one organisation might not be right for another organisation, if that makes sense. I think you've got to have the ability to identify what's needed. It's sometimes not, as a coach or a leader, it's sometimes not what you want, it's what the players or the organisation or the people need. And you've got to be flexible at times. But I think, when it comes to culture, I think you've got to identify, you've got to have a strong philosophy to start with, and then you've got to identify what behaviours and what actions you feel are going to be important to enable you to be successful and what you want to see on a daily basis. Then it's all about, and also identifying what actions and behaviours you don't want to see as well. I think that's important, just as important, if not more so. And then it's about, once you've identified that, it becomes quite simple. If you're willing to invest the time and energy, you've got to reinforce those good and positive actions and behaviours. And you've got to also and encourage them as well. So you've got to catch people doing good things, doing the right things all the time to reinforce that. This is the way we behave. This is the way we do things here. These are the standards that we uphold. And that initially that's down to you as a coach, but then that's up to the players to then carry those standards on. Essentially, at some point you've got to set the boundaries, but then they're the ones that have got to lead that and drive that. So you've got to instill and identify first and foremost what behaviours you feel are important and standards you want to have in place, and then they've got to drive that. And more importantly as well, the ones that you don't want to see, I think that's just as important, and then you've got to discourage those as well. So I think the standards that it's a well-used phrase, but the standards that you walk past are the ones you're willing to accept for the team and the organisation and the culture. So if you become lazy with that and let a few things slip through the cracks, then you've only got yourself to blame. So as a leader, you've got to be willing to invest a lot of time and energy into those things to ensure that you grow that positive culture. I think that's the best way to reinforce the culture and the environment, the actions and behaviours. And then when you talk about leadership, there are a lot of key words that probably come along with that. What makes a good leader? So you think about things like ownership, accountability, resilience, communication, and all those things are incredibly important as a leader. But I think what it all stems down to really for me are leadership begins with the relationships. It's the relationships between the people, essentially, that you have alongside your colleagues, whether that's a coach-player relationship, a coach-staff member relationship, a player-player relationship, whatever it is. It all starts with relationships, and then it comes down to trust and buy-in, essentially. So I think whenever you do become a leader or if you're put in a leadership role initially, whether that's a player brought into an organisation, you might bring a player in because he's got good leadership qualities. You might become a coach of a new organisation, for example, or you might become a general manager or a CEO of a company. It doesn't matter. It's all the same principles. I think you're in there. You're in a positional leadership role, essentially. So people are just going to follow you and listen to you because of your position, because they have to. It's up to you then as a leader to earn the trust and get the buy-in from, I think, the people that you're working alongside, really. So if you're in a positional leadership role, people aren't really going to buy in and trust what you're saying because they're doing it because they have to. You need to get to a position whereby they're buying into what you say because they want to, because they trust you, and they're buying in because they want to. And that all starts with the relationships. And I think what we had at Bradford at that time were incredible relationships between the players and the staff and things like that. So that's for me where leadership begins. You know, you've got to overcome that hurdle of being a positional leader straight away, build relationships, and then endeavour to get the trust of the players, get the buy-in from the players, and then you can begin to coach the players as well. So I think that's an important facet of leadership. And again, all the other things that we spoke about are important. You know, ownership, accountability, humility, honesty, all those things are important. But you can't have rules without relationships. Nobody cares what you know until they know you care about them. So you've got to invest a lot of time into that. That's my opinion anyway.
Fantastic. I mean, just what you said there, just going back slightly about the cultures and philosophy, and like I say, with it being a bit of a buzzword, but you hit the nail on the head where it means nothing without them, principles or expectations. Just taking that sort of into the next question, you mentioned earlier about the amount of internationals that was in that side when you came in and when you was breaking into that Bradford group. When you did get in, what was your role within that team?
Yeah, well, as I say, I was pretty young at that time, and I guess as a young lad coming into that environment, a lot of the time you're sort of along for the journey to begin with until you find your feet and your role and where you fit within that group. As I say, I was fortunate to play alongside some fantastic players at that time. It's mind-blowing, really, when you think about it, the amount of talent and quality that we had at that time. Not just us, but when you look at the other teams in the comp, like your Leeds, your Saints, they were just star-studded teams across the park. But I remember, I think my approach was coming into that group. I was looking around within my positional group, and we had some great players in front of me. I had people like Mike Forshaw, Great Britain International, Lee Gilmore, Great Britain International, Lee Radford, Great Britain International, Jamie Peacock, Great Britain International. The list goes on. Danny Gartner, fantastic Australian player. So you look around, you think, and my approach was always, well, what am I going to have to do as a young kid, as a young 18-year-old kid coming into this team to get in front of these players, because they're all fantastic players, don't get me wrong, but ultimately you are competing with those players as well for a position. And I wasn't being naive. I wasn't going to think that I was just going to walk into that squad. So I had to think about my approach and what were it going to be. So I thought, well, what are the things within my control here? Well, I can be the first in the gym on a morning. I can be the last to leave. I can use this opportunity with these fantastic players and mentors around me to try and learn as much as I possibly can from these players and try and pick the brains on a daily basis and be a pain in the neck, really, and try and learn as much as I possibly can from these players, because they might not be here forever. And I've got to be ready that when it is my time, that I've got to be ready and be able to fulfill that role. So what I found very quickly, though, was when you turn up on because I used to travel with Baloo and Radders. I've got a lot to be grateful for, spending a lot of time with Baloo and Radders, travelling over from that way as well, and they helped me out a lot. And I'm still good friends with Lee and Paul to this day. And you can always pick the phone up and pick the brains and ask them for any advice and information, and they're always willing to give it. So that's fantastic. And they were great mentors for me as a young age. But you'd always think, right, I want to try and get first in gym. You'd turn up and Mike Forshaw would be in there, Danny Gartner would be in there, Robbie Paul would be in there. You'd always want to be last to leave. Stuart Fielden would not leave the field until you'd left. So if that meant him staying till midnight that night, he would not leave because he was that competitive. These are the sort of people that you are spending your time with. It's funny, I don't know if you've been watching that documentary Last Dance with Michael Jordan. A lot of my mates have watched it and they've been blown away by some of the traits that Michael Jordan shows, and they just couldn't believe, the way he was, how competitive he was, how much kind of task conflict he used to encourage amongst his teammates, etc. Well, I grew up in that environment at Bradford. You had probably 10 Michael Jordans in that team. Fielden, Robbie Pauls, Leon Prices, who were holding you accountable to every little thing every single day. So as I say, I was fortunate to grow up, and it was a tough environment, but those are the expectations. And it helps you to be resilient at a very young age, and how to take criticism and to turn those things into positives. And yeah, as I say, I was fortunate to be around a lot of good players at that time, and I think that's what enabled the team to be so successful as well.
Just looking at that and listening to what you're saying there, it's, you know, kind of one of my questions was what sets you apart. I think then it's you've just alluded to that. It's your desire, your willingness to get better, like you mentioned early on, but also the ability and the willingness to surround yourself by people that are going to challenge you and push you in the right direction. I think, you know, and you'll see it as well. Talented players that don't take that advice, that don't understand that, and probably surround yourself with. We've got a saying is just be mindful of who's on your bus, who's going in that direction with you, because that can ultimately determine where that bus stops. You know, I think that's what you're touching on there. And how often do you see that with young kids about not having the right support or willingness to follow the right people?
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm a big believer in that you probably are the average of the people that you spend your most time with. I do believe that. So if you want to develop a trait, then if you want to become more competitive, or you want to become more resilient, or you want to be more humble, then spend time with someone who's super competitive, or spend time with someone who's really humble. If that's something you want to develop as a person, a trait you want to work on, then go and find a friend who's a great example, or a work colleague, and spend time with that person, and those traits will rub off on you. And again, recognise that in other people as well. I think recognise that if you are a very growth-minded person and you're fortunate to have that belief system, and you recognise someone who's not, then go and gravitate towards that person and spend time with them, and try and instill some of those belief systems within that person. And again, it's not easy, as you know, Dan. It's not easy. I was fortunate, as I said earlier, to grow up in an environment throughout my formative years where those values were instilled into me, and I'm happy to carry those values on now. A lot of people aren't. A lot of people don't grow up with those values, and it becomes, and you discover that as a coach very quickly, that not everybody shares your belief systems. And I think that's where a lot of players who've been successful do struggle with coaching, because the expectation is that everybody should see things the way you see it. Everybody should share your values. Everybody should share your work ethic. Everybody should want to be first in the gym and last to leave. Everybody should want to be the hardest worker in the room. Well, not everybody were fortunate to have your upbringing, to have those values instilled into them at a young age. And it does become difficult. When you've got a lad who has, it's fantastic. They're a dream to coach, and you don't probably have to invest much time into them. When you've got a lad who hasn't grown up in that environment, and then you find yourself working with that person and that player, then you've got to invest a lot of time and try and find the best ways to connect with that player to try and instill those values and get the best out of them. And it might not always work out that way. And it's going to be difficult for them. You're going to have to work on a lot of different techniques and how you instill habits around belief systems, things like that, to try and, because it's like a muscle in it. It's like a muscle. You don't just go and bench press once and get a massive chest. It takes time, and it's the same with trying to change belief systems and create habits amongst players like that. So and people, like that. I'm really fortunate that they were instilled into me at a young age, and they were ingrained into me. That people that weren't, then it's you've got to get them to. I think it comes down to acceptance, accepting that they might be resistant to change, or open-minded to, like you said, to taking on new views. Once they accept that, then it's about the willingness to change. So get them to accept it, hopefully get them to be open-minded and willing to change. And then you've got to, as a leader, then give them that direction. Well, I'm glad you've accepted that you're probably not seeing things the way we want you to. Right, these are the options. I'm glad that you're open-minded to these different options, and now let's take action on it. And then you've got to try and coach them and get them to instill those new habits and pathways. Not easy, easy with some, not easy with others. But that's I love it. I love coaching. I love the psychology of it, and I love the challenge of it. And I'm willing to invest that time into those aspects, because I feel like it's incredibly important. Yeah.
Brilliant. Again, just before sort of wrapping up that your past career as a player, I suppose, before moving on to your coaching, because I think what you're saying there is fantastic. What would you say is your greatest memory within that, when you was your playing career, those those grand final wins, the Challenge Cups, etc.?
Yeah, a lot of great memories, really. A lot of great memories, and it's difficult to pinpoint any, really. But I suppose the grand final of 2005 were a massive one for us. I was very fortunate to play a part in that, play a role in that. And the adversity that we faced throughout that year, we didn't get off to a good start. We'd lost a few games early on. I think we had to go 11 or 12 straight at the end of that season to ensure that we got through the playoffs and to the final as well. But it's funny because you ask a lot of players, and it is what you remember from those occasions. And it's not always the game itself. The game, because it is such a spectacle, it just goes by in a blur. And it's very hard to actually remember that, any specific moments from that game. And you could probably watch it back and not remember a minute. But it's what I remember vividly. I remember the build-up to that game, the week leading up to it. Because I think a lot of memories are based on emotion, aren't there? And I just remember like the emotion during that week. It was like something I probably never experienced. I've never seen such a relaxed group of players. I mean, I'm not a massive believer in fate and things like that, but it was almost like we felt destined to win. Like we felt like we couldn't lose. We had the momentum. I think we won 11 games straight, and you just had that air of invincibility about us that week. There were lads going in gym, lifting PBs, throwing ridiculous weight. At that stage in the year when you should be busted and getting yourself patched up, there were lads in the gym there throwing ridiculous weights around. I just remember how relaxed everyone were down on the field, on the training paddock. I remember the bus journey to the game, all the boys just playing cards like they used to always do, and like laughing, joking around. The energy was just incredible. Going out to the warm-up, remember again, just the noise hitting you at Old Trafford as you walked out for the warm-up. And just that feeling of walking out, just thinking there's no way we're going to possibly lose this game. Just, again, momentum's a funny thing, isn't it? And if you could bottle it, it'd be great. You'd probably be a millionaire. But we just had the momentum with us that day. And then probably don't remember much about the next 3 days that followed it as well. I was fortunate, as I say, to play probably a very small part in an incredible team, and to be along for the journey on some fantastic occasions as well. To be involved in grand final wins. I didn't play in any of the Challenge Cup finals, but I was involved within the squad on those days, and the World Club Challenges as well. I'm extremely grateful to look back when you do reflect from time to time and look back on those occasions with great fondness. And it's the friends that you make alongside the journey as well. I mentioned Radas and Baloo earlier on. You got some great friends who you meet along the way. And I think, it comes back to the people. And it's the people you meet along the journey that are important, and how they make you feel along that journey as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously now you've transitioned into being a coach, and the insight you've given so far has been fantastic. But what did that transition look like? I know, like say, a lot of players in the past have struggled with that, and then how did it come around or come about to become a coach? Yeah,
for me, it was a really easy transition. I always, as a player, and this is not for everyone, and I understand that. And again, you're coaching players on a daily basis. I love the tech tack side of the game. I love the study of the game. I always enjoyed that, the coaching aspects of the game, and I always did a bit of coaching as well alongside playing. Coached at community level at Normanton from time to time, and I always got great satisfaction of being able to help people as well, just being there as a facilitator and essentially helping people along the journeys. And that's essentially what coaching is, really. You're there to serve people, to help people become better, and for them to get the best out of themselves. You're essentially in a teaching role, and I always enjoyed that. And I used to take on that mantle as a player as well a little bit, try and take on a mentorship role for some of the younger players and help them find their way and find their strengths, and et cetera, et cetera. So it came quite naturally to me, really. As I say, I always really enjoyed that aspect of the game. So I felt like when my playing career was coming to an end, it was definitely a direction that I wanted to go in, a direction that I saw myself going. And I was incredibly fortunate, really, that I had a good relationship with Andrew Henderson, with Endo, who'd been coaching at London for about a year, I think, at that time. So Endo had gone down there a year previous as assistant coach to Joey Grimer, when London had just been relegated from Super League. So when he moved down there, I always stayed in touch. and again, this is just a bit of a segue, but when people, if I could offer any advice to anyone or any young aspiring coaches or any players who are not sure what they want to do when they get out of the game, it's not going to be anything from a tech standpoint or a logistical administrative standpoint or what. I just think it's just build strong relationships with people and keep those relationships strong, because you never know where it's going to lead, really. And it's an old saying, isn't it? But it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I'd always kept in touch with Endo and always had a really strong relationship with him. And I think as my career was coming to an end, he knew that as well. And Joey Grimer had just left London then at the time, so Endo had to step into the head coaching role. Wardy were coaching the academy at that time. So that meant that Wardy, he was splitting his time between academy and first team. And as you know yourselves, coaching takes up a hell of a lot of time. You're working with it, if you're doing a dual role as well, then, kiss your family life goodbye, because they ain't going to see you pretty much other. We all know that. And Wardy were doing that. So I think they knew they needed to probably recruit another coach. And as I say, I was coming out of playing. And I'd met with Endo because we'd had one of them season launches, and we'd gone for a coffee and everything else. And he was like, "What are you wanting to do, Langers?" And so I'd love to get into coaching, etc., etc. And I think when he then took on the mantle of head coach, going into the next year, Wardy obviously stepped up from academy. So Endo just contacted me and he just said, if you fancy it, Langers, there might be an opportunity down here in London. So, I at first I was thinking, well, it could be quite a big move that, I've never lived anywhere outside Normanton and things like that, and always been a bit of an home bird. But my partner Rose, I knew she could transition down there and get a job down in London quite easily with the company she worked for. So everything just kind of fell into place, really. So I ended up accepting the role. Just thought, it's a big decision, but why not? There's not many jobs in the game, as you know, is there really, especially coaching jobs. So we're incredibly fortunate that Endo offered me that role. And within probably a couple of months, that were it. I was moving out of my home. Rosie and I were looking to move down to London. And that's essentially how it all began, really. And that would have been, I think it's 5 years in November now, since I started coaching. And yeah, I've loved every minute. Loved every minute of it.
So that move to London, obviously Hendo moves on, goes to Warrington, and it leaves the coaching duo of you and Danny Ward there at London. And over the last couple of years, you had some great success. Promotion to Super League, probably against, forgive me if I'm well out my depth with this statement, but probably against a massive salary cap or budgeted Toronto. Beat them up to Super League, and then you competed probably the most admirable level of winning, I think, 10 games in Super League, still get relegated, but that is success given geography of London and like you said, the catchment of players that you get, and also probably a salary cap sport where some of the big hitters will play at the top end of that salary cap. Obviously, you've mentioned your values, also touched on your philosophy and that type of thing. Is there anything that you've missed so far, what you think is down to that success of London over the last couple of years with you and Danny?
I think, again, it's difficult to pinpoint on one thing. I think it probably started, I think Endo did a fantastic job when he took over. We moved to West London to Ealing, so what the club had bounced around so much over the previous years. The first team had never been based at the same location as the academy. London's a massive place, as you're well aware. So you'd have the first team training in West London, the academy are based in South London. So you'd have coaches and staff and players having to bounce around in London traffic at rush hour. And it just wasn't conducive. So one of the things that Endo did when he took over was he wanted to ensure that everybody were based pretty much on site, really. So when it came to the playing staff, what they'd had in the past were lads who were wanting to try and commute from up north. You'd had lads who were remnants of the old regime, so you might have lads who bought houses in South London or East London, where the club had been based at those times. So he wanted to make sure that everybody were on site, essentially. Probably more from it just takes out the arguments then of, I want to go up north for weekend, or I want to do this, and especially the punctuality aspect as well of trying to get to training on time in rush hour at London and using public transport, all those aspects anyway. So I thought it was a really good move from Endo to do that, to bring everyone close on site. Now, what that's probably done, whether it's inadvertent or not, is by bringing everyone together, It's probably well documented this as well, but by bringing everyone together on site and all the lads essentially living in very close quarters to each other. And this is something that I've discovered as a coach over these last couple of years. What it's enabled us to do is have a very high social capital amongst the organisation. And I think when you study, if you put time into studying successful organisations, whether it be sport or business or whatever, you tend to find that they've got a very, very high social capital. And I think having everybody together on site, living out of each other's pockets, having 2 or 3 lads living together in it, it forces you to become friends essentially. So you build very, very strong relationships, and it enables you to build very, very strong connections. And as a requisite of that, you end up having a very high social capital as an organisation. So I think that's been so what Endo did probably 2 or 3 years ago by bringing everyone on site, we're seeing the fruits of that now within our organisation. People referred to as a band of brothers, got a very high team spirit, etc., etc. Well, that's a lot of it's down to that high levels of social capital. And then again, combine that with a good facility, a fantastic facility at Ealing, about the environment and the culture that we as staff try and develop and encourage for to get the best out of the players as well. I think all those things combined enable us to try and be as successful as we can. Now, again, it does come back to the people. We're fortunate we've got some fantastic people on board at London as well in every single role. You alluded to it earlier, Danny. I think if you get the right people on the bus in the right seats, they're going to get you to where you want to go, regardless of what the plan or direction is. So everything starts with the people. I think that's what Endo wanted to do as well. You had Wardy down there as a rugby league man. All his S&C department are rugby league men. They've played rugby league at a reasonable level. We've got people in his medical department who've played either rugby union or league at a reasonable. So you've got a lot of rugby people there. Well, not only that, are good people who share similar values. So I think if you can do that, try and create a good environment, good culture, with a high social capital, it enables you to hopefully go on and be successful.
I love that. I love that about the social capital stuff. I've heard you talk about it before. And while I've got you on stuff like that, I know you're a well-learned individual. You're well-read. Is there anything specific that you have read over the time or listened to when you say about an audio book or podcast? Anything that you give people who might be listening to this? There's a few bits of nugget where you go, look, read that, have a look at this, because that'll help you out in your journey.
Yeah, I do enjoy reading. I wouldn't say I wasn't an avid reader really until I started coaching, but the reason I started to read because I love coaching so much, and obviously I'm really passionate about getting better, that I knew that there's so much information out there that's free, and you've just got to be willing to put the time and effort into to try and find what works essentially. And I think it might be Damien Hughes who always says success leaves clues, and I think it's very true. I believe in that. So if you're willing to put the time in and to invest into to reading, to learning, to studying successful organisations, teams, individuals, whatever it might be, there's always going to be some clues and some common denominators there that lead you right down the right path. And then it's the challenge is then to obviously make it applicable to what you're doing as a rugby league coach, essentially. But again, I enjoy that. I enjoy trying to pick out little bits, and then how can we make this transferable and get this message across to the players to try and get the best out of it. So we spend a lot of time on that. Obviously, that's a big part of our philosophy, and we feel like it's incredibly important. But yeah, I've read some really good books that have shaped my belief systems probably over the last few years. I think Mindset by Carol Dweck's an amazing book. It's really profound. I really enjoyed some of Ryan Holiday's stuff. He's kind of talked a lot about Stoic philosophy and how you can bring that into modern culture. And that really resonated with me as well. It's becoming quite popular now, Stoicism and things like that, but it did really resonate with me as a young coach at that time. I really enjoyed reading. One of the first books I read as a coach was Pete Carroll, who's the Seahawks coach, and his book's called Win Forever. And he talks a lot about philosophy, and it took him a long time to arrive at his philosophy, essentially. And he had a lot of coaching jobs over his years, and he got let go from a lot of roles, and then eventually ended up at USC. And he said it wasn't him probably until he got released from an NFL contract, and he said he pretty much had to go back, take time, reflect, and he said it probably took him best part of a year to come up with a manifesto and a philosophy of essentially what what were important to him and what he wanted to deliver the next coaching role that he got. And he got a job at USC University, and he decided to implement this philosophy. And then they went on, an incredible winning streak, and they ended up winning maybe 7. I might get this wrong, but it might have been 7 or 8 back-to-back national titles, which eventually led him on to coaching at Seattle. And they thought, well, will this philosophy that I've been able to implement at university translate into the NFL? And that was a massive challenge for him. And then he went on and they ended up winning a Super Bowl with Seattle. Almost came within a cat's whisker of winning another one against New England. It was that massive interception on goal line. So they could have had a bit of a dynasty there. So it just showed when he talks about philosophy, he always, and I always use this again when I speak to people and coaches and players and things. And it was really good advice that I've taken on. And he said, you need to be able to, first you need a strong philosophy. One of the first questions he asks when he interviews different coaches is, what's your philosophy in 25 words or less, essentially? And if they can't pin down what their philosophy is within 25 words or less, he'll just tell them to go away, think about it, and come back when you can. And then when they can, he'll get them to elaborate, and you should be able to elaborate and then go into as much depth as required. Because I think essentially everything begins with that as a coach. So that were really influential for me, reading that book, Win Forever, Pete Carroll, really resonated with me. One, with everyone, and I understand that, and I totally get it. But again, there's so much information out there. The key is, are you able to take that information on board? How do you take it on board? How do you ensure that you're able to understand it? And then more importantly, how can you then transfer that and implement it with what you're doing for your job? So then I've just tried to develop some techniques that work for me around that, really. Because anyone can read a book, anyone can, listen to a podcast, watch something, be inspired by it. But then it's, well, how can I ensure that runs throughout what we're trying to achieve with the players? And again, that's another challenge entirely, isn't it? So all the information's out there. It's just how you use it.
Definitely, I think that's outstanding. Just to put you on the spot, though, what's your coaching philosophy?
25 words or less. 23. We'll go 23.
I probably do it in less than that. So again, it probably took me a while to arrive at this, and it's always evolving, isn't it? It's always evolving. You're always putting it to the test. Can it get better? Can I take this out? Can I put that in to ensure the best results, essentially the best success? But I'm a big believer in person first. I think my coaching style is very altruistic as opposed to anything else. It's all about the team and the people, essentially. So I always begin there. So my philosophy, in a nutshell, is be the person that can follow the process to become the player that can execute the plan. I think that's 25 words or less. And that's essentially what it is.
Nice. I can't even count as quick as you said it.
I mean, if you need, I can elaborate on it just to kind of give you an idea of what that means, essentially. But so everything starts with the people for me. But if you be the person that can follow the process to become the player that can execute the plan. So at the beginning of every year, you come up with a plan and a vision for that year, essentially. What you want to achieve as a playing group, as a staff, as an organisation. So you start at the top. If you look at it like a pyramid, you start at the top, and you need to decide what that plan is and what that plan looks like. So that might be your goals for your year, your outcome, performance, process goals. It might be what you want your identity to be as a team. When you talk about tech, how you want to structure your offence, your defence, etc., etc. So all that falls under your plan. Now, to execute that plan, you're going to need a specific kind of personnel or a specific kind of player. So then you need to look at what attributes that player is going to need, essentially, for them to carry out that plan. So if you look from a tech standpoint, what kind of skill sets they're going to require, what kind of tactical knowledge they're going to need, or you're going to have to implement as a coach or deliver to them as players for enable them to carry out that plan. When you look at a psychological or physical standpoint, if you want to play a certain way in offense or defense, what kind of players are going to need to do that, essentially, to carry out that game plan. So that then becomes the player. So that when you've decided what kind of plan you've got and what player you're going to need to execute that plan, you're going to need to decide on a process that's going to enable that player to become that the person to become that player, essentially. So what your process is essentially it's your planning, it's your scheduling, it's your programming, what your gym sessions look like, what you're doing in your analysis, what your day-to-day looks like, and you're breaking it right down essentially into the process goals. So it is that just day-to-day, hour-to-hour, what your program looks like essentially, what your environment looks like. So you're creating an environment that can enable them players to follow that process to become those players that you need to execute that plan essentially. Does that make sense? So
absolutely.
That's when it comes down to process. So again, if you're talking about your classroom work, your analysis, your gym, your field, how much time you spend delivering to the players from a tech tax point of view, how much time, what's important, we spoke about that before, Danny, what's important really, what you want to spend the most time on to enable you to be successful. Are you going to spend hours out there on tech tac, or do you think building a stronger social capital is more important? Do you want to spend more time on the psychological aspects or the physical aspects? Do you want to spend more time in the gym, etc., etc.? But it depends on what kind of player you're looking for, really. So that then defines your process, your day-to-day, your scheduling, what your program looks like. Well, in order to follow that specific kind of process, you need a specific kind of person, essentially. Not everyone can follow that process and buy into that process because it's not easy. It's incredibly difficult, and the requirements that we ask of the players, it's not for everyone. So then it comes down to the person, really. So you need to decide what kind of a person we need within this organisation who's going to be able to follow this process to then become the player that we need. We're going to be able to go out on that weekend who we can trust to execute the plan. So you just need to decide what traits. It comes back to what we said before, really. What values and traits that you feel are the most important that you want within your organisation. And again, it's different for everyone. Everyone shares different values. So you just got to decide and pinpoint what they are. So whether that be you need growth-minded individuals who are optimistic, or willing to work hard, or incredibly humble, or willing to stay healthy and do all the right things away from the club as well as at the club, etc., etc. So once you've decided what kind of people you need, then you've got to educate those people on what's right and what's wrong. So spend a lot of time on educating the players on, well, this is what a humble person looks like and this is how they behave. This is what it means to be growth-minded. This is how we expect you to behave as a person when you're within this organisation. And then hopefully, as I say, you get the right person who can follow that process to become the player that you need to execute the plan that you want to carry out and achieve the goals that you want for that year. So, I think, as I say, it took a while to arrive at that point, but if you can get everybody to buy into that, and essentially if you've got a strong philosophy that underpins everything within the organisation, it's the lifeblood of what you're delivering. You've got to believe in it at the end of the day. Other people might not agree with it. Some people might have a really simple philosophy, a really complicated one, whatever it is, but then the key is that you've got to have so much passion and belief in that you can try and get other people to follow you along the journey as well. Yeah, to say,
I think for me, I think that's outstanding. And I think what it does is provide it with anything, with culture, with philosophy, anything. The trick to it is to have the consistency in your message and delivery. I think a framework like that philosophy would allow you to do that. And not only that, it forces you to be explicit with your players and your coaching group. Everybody now understands what it is, what you want, and what direction you're heading, and what role they have to play in that.
Yeah, 100%. Because at the end of the day, it's all about clarity and clear message, I think. I've been spending a bit of time over this last probably 7 weeks just trying to sort of develop. If you could just come up with a generic plan, essentially, to go into any organisation and try and map out what might lead them to enable them to try and be successful, whatever you term success as, whatever that is. You measure it in different ways, but I just think that a lot of it does start with that. It's underpinned by, I think, your philosophy, your belief system. You need it to be very clear, very, very simple, very clear, like you said, Danny, so everybody can get on board with it and you can get everybody pointing in the same direction. Then that leads on to then, well, once you've got that, you need a clear vision and a plan of where you're going and getting the right people on board. So identifying what people you need within your organisation. I think there's an old expression: be quick to fire and slow to hire. Take your time on finding the right people. But if someone's not right, then don't be afraid to to let them go, essentially. And then once you've got the right people, it's about then you implementing a very clear, specific vision plan, and then handing it over to them, essentially, and letting them run with it. And then your job as a facilitator or a coach then is to, right at the top of that, I think, is to, you've got to be very good then at deciding what to sustain and what to change. I think, especially from a coaching perspective, every year, you're faced with challenges. And what do we keep the same? What's working? And what do we need to change? And if you can then follow that model, year after year, I think I don't know if that's quite a good blueprint or not. I'm not sure, but it's just something I've been thinking about over these last few weeks. If you could transfer that from sport to business to school, educational program, whatever it might be, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is a good one because it gives you some adaptability. Your principles are the same, your structure is the same. It's just the end goal might be different depending on circumstance. So your end goal in Super League might have been different to what it is when you play in the Championship, or when you spend on squad is bigger or less. It changes, but yet your systems and structures stay the same. I think it's quite robust. That I pinch that. I think.
Feel free, Matt. I mean, that's at the end of the day. We're all here to help each other, aren't we? And I love, as I said before, Dan, I love spending time, not trying to blow smoke up your ass, but I love spending time with you because you challenge people, you ask a lot of questions, and it's good to spend time with like-minded people like that who do challenge you on a daily basis. I think it's essential for you to enable to grow. So I love having conversations like this and spending time with people who are going to pick your brains, or you can pick their brains, and because that's what we're here to do, really. We're just here to help people, aren't we? And I think there's no, I'd never try and keep. So if I have any ideas what I feel like are going to be useful to someone, I wouldn't try and hinder their success or keep it to myself or whatever. I'll try and help people with it, and give them advice. And that's one of my roles as a coach, is to do that with the playing group that we've got. You're there to serve, to help them in any way possible that you can, essentially. So that just, not just in coaching, but in life for me as a person. I think when you go back to those values, in order, one of the things that I get a lot of gratitude and gratefulness from is helping people. If you feel like you can help someone in any way, shape or form, then you get gratitude from that, and that enables you to be happy, essentially. That's certainly for me anyway. I don't know if that's for everyone, but certainly for me personally.
Yeah, just off the back of that, I think, like we're saying there, I think that was mainly the reason why I set up the podcast as well, to bring some of those insights. And I think some of the information that you've pulled out today has been absolutely outstanding. Just going on back to working with Danny every day, it can be a bit of a nightmare when he challenges it every day. And he's never wrong, he's just sometimes less right.
That's the only way you win.
Just sort of wrapping up, to be fair, I think, like I say, some of the stuff that we've talked about there has been brilliant, especially firstly for young players. Some of the habits and traits that you was describing earlier, and then moving on to your coaching philosophy and looking where you're going, moving forward. I think it's been outstanding. Just something that we've been asking everybody is sort of their best coaching drill or activity. Like, say, everyone has one that if you're struggling or you need to pull something out your back pocket, it's just something that you always go to, you enjoy delivering, and you get the best out of your players. So just put it on you. What's your favourite?
Yeah, again, it's a really good question, that, and I'm sure loads of people have different opinions on it. It was interesting listening to Scully and Brazier when you did the podcast with them, and they both pretty much alluded to the same thing, didn't they? Just like get out there, essentially let the lads get out there and play, just play some touch and pass, and let them get out there and learn as you go. And I probably find it hard to disagree, if I'm honest. I think obviously there's a different stage of it, and it depends. It depends on the group you've got. It depends on obviously their knowledge. It depends on their skill levels, their abilities, etc., and where they are in terms of their tech ability. So whether you're coaching an under-8s team in East Hull, or you're coaching a professional full-time outfit, but I think it's essentially the same, really. I'd just say I think you learn just by going out there and playing, but then it's just about what kind of structures and rules and things you can put in place around that. So, I mean, from a young age, you just want to go out there and play touch and pass, don't you? You just want to go out there and play touch and pass and things like that. And you can put, as a coach, then you can put different rules within that framework. So whether it's offside touch or, double up touch, or everybody hits the deck touch, or you might return round a cone. You can put so many variations on just a game of touch and pass, and I think that's great for young lads. I think what I really enjoy delivering at a higher level is we do so many situations and scenarios. So we'll play a lot of game-specific things, and a lot of it will be dictated on, if you do your research and you look at things like how long the ball's in play in an average game in Super League. So the ball might be in play on an average of 7 minutes at a time or whatever. So then you can look at your loadings and your GPS, and you can structure things around that. So you can come up with a framework of a session, essentially, that you can try and replicate game specifics as much as you possibly can. So we might do 4 7-minute blocks, for example, because that's how long the ball's going to be in play. And we know we need to be moving it over probably 90 metres a minute or whatever it might be, depending on GPS. So that helps. But from a coaching perspective, then, that's a lot of that's the S&C side. But for us, I love situations and scenarios. So I love getting the players in. So if you're doing this 7-minute block, and it might be, right, there's 2 minutes left in the game, you've just scored a try and kicked a goal to go in front, you're receiving a kickoff. So that might be a scenario and situation for one team. The other team, obviously, 2 minutes behind, you just conceded, you're kicking off. You've got 1 minute to debrief, away you go, boys. And you've got a 7-minute block, or it might be a 4-minute block, or it might be a 2-minute block. So then, it's how you approach that. It might be, you might put them straight on the spot, right? The scores are tied, or whatever it might be. You've just received a penalty. So you might give them the option to go for goal. They might decide to play on. So you've got a minute to debrief, away you go. So it's about just practicing as many situations and scenarios that you might potentially face on a weekend, essentially. It's putting the players, they can have fun while they're doing it. You give them plenty of autonomy to make the decision making. You give them creativity and autonomy with the decision making process as well. And then when you debrief, you can hopefully, as the coach, then you've had a chance to look at it, and depending on your coaching style at that time, you can decide whether you want to push, pull, or bring the questions out and things like that. But I just love scenarios and situations. We do a hell of a lot of it at London, and it put us in so many. We won so many games within the last 10 minutes, or the boys just know exactly how to react in certain situations because we put them in those situations and they've been there, and they'd had the autonomy over it and the creative decision making process to make those decisions like that. So when they get on a weekend and they're faced with it, boom, the message all you have to do as a coach is, boys, we've been here before. We've been here before many a time. Exactly how to deal with this. Be confident, be comfortable. And you don't have to be telling them, right, we need to do this, we need to do that, we need to kick the ball out here, we need to manage the game. You don't have to do that because they've been there. So I think situations and scenarios are awesome. We use so many of them. And again, it's just letting the boys play as well. So yeah, that's what I think we enjoy as coaches, but also what I think the lads enjoy it. We speak to the boys a lot on it. I think interaction leads to innovation. So again, it's not what we want necessarily. It's what they need. If we feel like we want to do an hour's worth of just practice, so 50-60% of just tackle technique, for example, that might be what we want to do with the players that day. But what they might need is essentially like just go out there and put it in a live situation, more medium picture stuff. Just go out there and learn it. So we'll speak to the players and interact with them and decide what they feel they want to do that day. And then we'll be able to then come up with some sort of a compromise of what we implement into our coaching schedule.
Fantastic.
Outstanding. Some really good stuff in there that I know Rob will put together to get out some kind of content for coaches to use. So thank you for that. Appreciated. Last question right before we wrap up is if you could ask any player or coach, past or present, that isn't necessarily even in rugby league, who would it be? What would your question be and why?
Yeah, it's a good question, that, isn't it? And it's difficult. I think, and again, going back to conversations we've had in the past, Danny, I probably wouldn't pick one specific coach, and I know I'm probably not necessarily avoiding the question a little bit, but I'd probably try and ask every coach or every player and pick as many brains as I possibly can, and just ask them just one simple question: what do you feel is actually important to enable success? I think because again, a lot of people probably have different ideas and things like that on what is important. It's what you spend most of your time on, really, because if you can find out what's really important, what's really at the heart of enabling you to be successful, I think as a team or an organisation, then that's what you're gonna spend the most time on, isn't it, really? So, and it might not be what you feel as a coach is most important. You might feel that spending 2 hours a day on the field, going over all the regimented stuff, practicing your tackle tech, practicing your catch pass, your core skill, etc. That might be right. 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, 5 hours a day that might be right. That might be the most important thing. So that's where I'm going to contribute most of my time to. You might speak to another coach who says the most important thing is what we spoke about earlier about social capital. That's more important in a team sport than the 1%ers. When it's an individual sport, cycling, swimming, etc., 1%ers are very important. Marginal gains, 1%ers. In a team sport, maybe not necessarily so. Team spirit, the bonds between the players, how much you want it, things like that. That's probably a bit more important. So, am I going to spend more time on social capital? Building relationships and bonds and things like that. So that might not be as much time spent on field. It might be more time spent in pub. More teams come together around a beer keg than they do a bowl of kale or whatever. So, you might spend more, because that might be what's the most important. So if you can find out the key to what's the most important, I think that's what we'd certainly spend the most time on as coaches. It's as simple as that for me. And I'm sure that if you asked every player and every coach, there would be a common theme. There'd be a common denominator. You'd probably disagree on certain things, but eventually I think you'd probably come to one defining theme that everybody would agree on. And if you could find out what that was, and then that's certainly what I wouldn't be afraid, or we wouldn't be afraid of just chucking all his eggs into that basket and investing all his time into that, essentially. So I know that doesn't probably answer your question as specifically as you wanted, but that's certainly.
I think you've been true to your values there and want to kind of be continuously developing yourself and always trying to explore from everywhere. You've been greedy. You've asked every coach, every question, every player. So congratulations on that one. I think for me on that one, the interesting one will be what coach says to what they deliver, what they think is important to what to actually deliver. I think that is part of the key to success. Knowing what's important and then having the tools, the resources, or whatever it is to implement it.
Yeah, I agree. And again, that's the art of coaching, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody's got differing opinions, but I'm pretty certain that there would be a recurring theme throughout. And if you could land on that, then you'd be onto a winner.
Well, we'll get on to that for you. We'll ask as many coaches and players as we can. We'll come back to the definitive answer after we've sold it first.
Can I get some shares in it before you do it?
Done. Right, sweet. Rob, do you want to wrap up? And then we'll thank you for your time, Jamie, and let you go.
Again, like I say, just want to thank you for your time. Really, really appreciate it. I hope, obviously, we get through this situation sooner rather than later. And when we do, sort of the best of luck for you and Danny Ward down at London. But for me, it's been fantastic. I'm sure, like I say, for other coaches and young players, they'll get a lot out of this. So, like I say, massive thanks from myself.
No, I really appreciate having me on, Rob and Danny. Thank you. It's been enjoyable, and so we can talk about this all day, can't we? Really, I think if you're passionate and you're amongst like-minded people, as I say, you can spend time with people like that all day. So I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Right, over and out.